We all fall into our own kind of love with C.S. Lewis, and I had fallen into mine at 12 years old when I read the Screwtape Letters and then Narnia. But C.S. Lewis only loved one woman enough to marry, only one woman he called the whole world, stars, water, air, and field and forest, as they were reflected in a single mind. Helen Joy Davidman Gresham, called Joy, and Clive Staples Lewis, called Jack, had a decade-long relationship that culminated in a most improbable love affair, spurring gossip and conflicting stories that are told until this day. But this love story is not a fairy tale. Joy was not a princess who waited in a castle for her prince. This is the story of a fiery woman who heard the cry of her own soul and answered. Joy's courageous journey started in New York and then on to London, the beauty and majesty of Oxford, England, and the home of C.S. Lewis and his brother Warren at the Kilns. Who was this woman who so enraptured Lewis that her death nearly destroyed his faith? Why do we only know her as the dying wife in Shadowlands, when her story is both fascinating and provocative? Joy was a complicated and brilliant woman of Ukrainian and Polish immigrants, a multi-award-winning poet, a child prodigy, a novelist, a critic, a protege of the MacDowell Artists Colony, and so much more. She read before she was 3 years old, graduated from high school at 14 years old, and gained a master's degree by age 19 from Columbia. She was also an ex-atheist, converted Jew, and former communist. She was married with 2 young boys and living in upstate New York. How was she ever to know or fall in love with a Don and Christian apologist in Oxford, England? This seems an impossible pairing, but it might have begun with a mystical conversion experience that Joy didn't understand. An intellectual seeker, she sent her inquiries on faith and God to C.S. Lewis. That began an almost 3-year pen friendship, with letters that flew across the sea from Oxford, England to upstate New York, inspiring both of them intellectually, spiritually, and emotionally. In 1952, with things at home in great turmoil, Joy sailed to England to finally meet her friend Jack. Whether in London or in Oxford, whether punting on the Cherwell or hiking Shotover Hill, whether having pints at the Eagle and Child or collaborating in Lewis's rooms at Magdalen College, Joy and Jack's friendship blossomed. Through a decade of obstacles, laughter, oceanic travel, and deep friendship, Joy and Jack grew in faith and toward love. Their Eros story contributed to some of C.S. Lewis's greatest works on love, on grief, on the true self behind the veil, and of course, faith. Yet Joy is rarely acknowledged for the muse, editor, best friend, and beloved wife she was to this revered author. I began this novel a little in love with the image of C.S. Lewis, a little enchanted by Joy and by Oxford. And what I discovered was a fascinating woman who teaches us about the great and worthwhile struggle toward the undivided life of a woman's soul seeking God. Becoming Mrs. Lewis allows Joy to emerge from the shadowlands of history.